Hey everybody, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 3, Episode 7. What is Starfleet? From my perception, you could say, what is Starfleet through different various lenses? Or you can also say, what is Starfleet from various different perspectives? Or you could say, what is Starfleet from various viewpoints? And in this episode, there's a baker dozen, minimally, of viewpoints, perspectives, lenses that are given to us. Sometimes these lenses are focused a little differently, colored differently at times, depending on which of the 13, the baker dozen 13 points, individuals, characters, races, organizations, what's going on at the moment. This was a very complex review. Well, not even review. It was a very complex episode. I had to watch it 3 times. The first time I was going, what the heck? Okay, there's a moral story here. Second time I went through it, it's like, okay, there's some substance in here, but I'm not really sure where and how to articulate this and how to connect it to everything that's been happening this year. And I realized you really can't connect it necessarily with everything this year in the Star Trek series. But the third viewing through made me focus a lot more into what's going on. This thing is complex, messy. Writing is sometimes really, really good, and other times, it's just like hodgepodge together. It's like it's put together amateur hour-ish at times. And I know part of this is supposed to be from a reporter's perspective and having a camera just catching snippets of action here and there and conversations. I get part of that, but it's just it. So, before I dive into some really more specifics, I want to say I have my scale. Some of you may be aware the highest is a latinum level. Then I go down to platinum. Then I go down to gold, bronze, silver, bronze, tin, lead, or nothing. But in this case, I had to look at it from the lens of 4 different things. 1, biased messaging that happens with the reporter. I give that thing a lead. The moral fiber that's being discussed in here, I give that a latinum. The storytelling, I give it a 10 because it's just fragmented. The writing, once again, because of fragmentation, I give it a 10 metal. The concept, overall concept, I'm not saying this is in the realm of the greatest Star Trek episode concepts of all time, but the concept is really solid, and I'll give it a latinum for this specific season. And when you combine all this and get the execution of this, I'm giving it a bronze, and the latinum is pulling everything else up. The 2 latinums are pulling everything else up. So I want to hear your thoughts, Norb, with Silver Age. I want to hear your commentary. Meanwhile, I'll dive in here specifically into my bigger dozen of things. Okay, my bigger dozen. I'm just looking at Tabitha. Sorry about that, my producer. The bigger dozen of things in here. 13 things. And these are the lenses, views, perception, etc. Yeah, there's spoilers in this, but I'm trying not to really get into the real spoilers in this review. But I'm going to try to avoid it. But the lenses / filters, viewpoints. 1, a reporter. 2, Pikes. 3, Una's, the first officer. Erica Ortega's viewpoint. Spock's viewpoint. Uhura's viewpoints. La'an's, and viewpoints and commentaries. Latani's, the alien race that's involved in this, that is being attacked by another alien race who's trying to take over their system. And they came up with a weapon, and they've had like over 9 million deaths, I guess, in this conflict. Then there is this creature, very noble, but not when we see it, Chikaru. Then we go back to our doctor, Mbinga. Then we get into a little rebel aspect of Latani's. We touch onto that. Then we have the Federation Command. And then probably the most important segment that brings this back and gives a strong message is the crew and family of the Starship Enterprise / the Federation. Mull that for a few seconds. Okay, from the first thing, the reporters. The reporter is actually Erica Ortega's brother, and he is looking at this from trying to do an expose, trying to expose all the negatives about the Federation. And we eventually find out it has really a lot to do with his bias from the perspective that his sister almost died as being a member of the Federation, and I don't think he was ever supportive of her becoming a member of Starfleet. I don't think he was ever that, so he has a negative bias, and his interviews have been negative and biting, and even though he doesn't know that, and things he does, for example, he just goes, what separates the Federation from an empire? Like, he doesn't say it this way. The mirror universe type empire. Doesn't say it that way, but there's that. What separates the crew from being explorers to soldiers? And he's focused a lot on the violence, trying to show negative stuff. And surprisingly, the way this episode starts, it kind of looks like Federation or Starfleet gave their okay to put this thing out. Kind of strange. So we had to go through that, and that was the bias I didn't like, because it wasn't a well-founded bias. I mean, it would have been a bias from the perspective that, really, what is your value? What makes you different? It was more attacking all the time. So that's one thing I didn't like. Pike, the second component of this, Pike is Pike. But the way they portrayed him, and this is the sad thing again, this goes back to, this is supposed to be really about him, this whole series. He only has snippets. But, he basically says, hey, I'm following orders, or that's classified, stuff like that. Una, same thing. Love Una's character. Same kind of conversations occur. But there's a little snippets of both Una and Pike being in sort of a war roomish thing, having conversations about the conversation with Starfleet Command, and saying, we don't always like to follow orders, but those are the orders, kind of. But you couldn't hear that in this recording that the reporter's doing, but with these floating cameras. Ortega, Erica, a fun navigator, of course, brother. And she gets stinged a few times too, and she tries to be protective of things. And yeah, we see some of her violent aspects and some of her bitterness. Of course, we see some of the bitterness that the Gordon thing is still involved there, and with her having where she was basically not willing to follow commands a couple episodes ago. Spock. We see him kind of showing his logical side, having conversations with that, talking about how he's growing up, and he tried to cut out the human's half because his best friend at the time was told not to hang out with him. And then we, of course, eventually see Spock trying to mind meld with this creature. Uhura, communications officer. I don't understand why they keep forgetting about her communication skills until later in every episode. Don't get that, but she is sort of a slight romantic interest with this reporter, and that went a roller coaster ride. She got pissed off at him and kind of stuff, and he took things out of context from her, so that kind of made this thing convoluted. The Latani, who were at battle with this other alien race, suffered like 9 million casualties, whereas the other race, I think, was only 100-some thousand casualties, 118,000 casualties. And so what they thought they could do was they found this planet, this moon that has these creatures that have incredible magnetic powers and shoot off radiation and can destroy things. So they decided to do everything in their power to use like a shot caller and control and not let a living being be itself. And that living being was Chakari. That's the ninth lens factor here. And that confused creature, entity, very confused, being controlled by the Latani, bitter, by wanting to protect her children. They're on the moon, but also she can't live with herself, as we find out that as this thing goes on. And she's asking for the Federation's help, not knowing it's a Federation. And, it's number 9. Number 10 is the doctor, because the doctor gets interviewed and by the reporter, Ortega's brother. And somehow or another, he found out that our doctor, Mabinga, was like an assassin, not evil, but a spy. And well, I'll call him an assassin for Starfleet and the Klingon Wars. And you try to get him to admit that he did bad things and was told to do bad things by Federation. So we saw that. Then we saw, early in the episode, a rebel group from Latanis who tried to destroy the creature, the Jakaru. And, of course, the ship was too small and they got destroyed. And she was saying, please stop before the ship got destroyed. Enterprise beamed her over, and this person eventually died on the bed. But she basically pleaded not to let this thing happen, not to let the Jakari fall in the hands of her race. Then we have the other component, the Federation. And the Federation command structure. All we ever see them is in the perception. We're giving a command to go give this creature over to the Latani's home planet, and eventually evolving to the point where if they can't give the creature to Latani, then you need to make sure no one else can get their hands on it. And, even if it comes down to you have to do destruction and feedback back and forth. We don't really see the reasons why the Federation is trying to help Latani, I'm guessing, other than the fact that there's been 9 million people or 9 million of the race killed. And then we get into crew and family at the end of this, and this is where the reporter finally understands the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the comradeship, the support and love of the crew members, members of the Federation for each other, and the ability, the concern over protecting other races. And I kind of think this is where an aspect it kind of talks about, like United States being the most powerful organization, army, military in the world, helping other countries and conflicts around the world. And I think they kind of portray us like that. So this thing was, the moral compasses, like, it's really awesome. The moral questions were, the question about taking free will from a living being and not letting that living being, the Jacaro, decide for themselves what they wanted to do. And so that was the moral compass that happens in here. And eventually when they realized, Pike and company realized that the creature's intelligent and has been manipulated, and the only way the creature can see the way that the creature can live with itself is eventually take its own life in the sun. And of course, we got tears. We see tears, like any documentary would do, from the crew members when the Jacaro goes in the sun, takes its life. So at the end, basically, Pike and company make a promise before it takes its life that they're going to protect the moon and not let anything happen to her children, and they won't get altered. And the Latani get mad. The warship that came over gets mad at them, and they were about to attack and said, "We have multiple warships in this area." And guess what? Pike said, "You better think about that because you don't really want to get us upset as a Federation." And the one more thing I'll say about this too is warships, starships. That was one of the points that was brought up earlier by the reporter. What's the difference between a starship and a warship? And I guess right then and there's the example: Starship Enterprise, the warship Latanis. So, Norb with Silver Age, I'd like to hear your comments, feedback. Please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.